Hello! Welcome to Lsbf's tapes on how to answer an F6 exam standard question in 10 easy steps. My name is Zainab Hameer and I shall be taking you through 10 easy steps on how to tackle an exam question in F6. Now, before I take you through these 10 steps, the question that I have picked up has been from the pilot paper given by the examiner. Your examiner for F6 is David Harrowin, and he has given us a pilot paper, and I have based these 10 steps on the pilot paper. I have given you a link of where you can find the pilot paper. You can find them on the ACCA website under the past exam papers. First step is requirement. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to take you through a sample of requirements that I have picked up to show you how we see the requirement and how much we can understand from just reading the requirement. So let us go and see a few samples of requirements that we have now. When you start reading a question, make sure you are always reading a question from the bottom up, meaning always read the requirement first. What you will find is that when you utilize the first 15 minutes of your reading time looking at the requirements of all the 5 questions you have, within those 15 minutes you will be able to decide which question you want to do first, because it is not a compulsion to start with the first question first. You can very easily start with question number 5, for instance. So reading the requirement first gives you the comfort of knowing what questions you will be comfortable with. Always tackle the one that you find easier first. So let's go away and see the first requirement I have for you. The first requirement I have is from the pilot paper, question 1, called Peter Sheik. The requirement is calculate the income tax payable by Peter Sheik for the tax year 2011-12 and calculate the amount of national insurance that will be paid by Peter and Haute Couture in respect of Peter's earnings and benefits for the tax year 2011-12. Now, when I'm reading this requirement, what comes to mind is income tax payable. The requirement is asking me to prepare an income tax computation. That means national insurance contributions. From what I can gather is that I might have to do some maybe class 1 calculations for Peter's employment, for instance. So just by reading the requirement, I've already got a picture in my mind as to what it is the examiner is asking for. So there it is. When it says income tax payable, at the back of my mind, I know there is income tax computation. Hence, there might even be a few types of incomes, maybe some employment, maybe some investment income. National insurance contributions, maybe some class 1, maybe class 1A. So just by reading the requirement, there's quite a bit I can tell myself about the question without really having to go into the question. I haven't yet looked at the question. Just looking at the bottom line, I managed to tell myself quite a bit. I would like to take you through a few other set of requirements, but before I go on to those requirements, can I point that if you are using the ACCA website to get past exam papers, be very careful, as those exam papers would not have been updated for the current Finance Act. Hence, I would advise you to get a revision kit, for instance, of the latest Finance Act. The next requirement I have for you is from December 2009, a question called Na Style. Now, before I go on with the requirement, let me just point the examiner, David, tends to have a very good sense of humor, and he brings this out with the names that he chooses in his questions. So quite often you will see that the questions have really wonderful names. So that's simply the examiner trying to show his sense of humor. So let us look at this requirement that we had in December 2009. Part A, calculate the amount of trading profits that will be assessed on NASTILE for the tax year 08, 09, 9, 10, 10, 11 respectively, clearly identifying any amount of overlap. So I'm thinking assessment of profits. Assessment of profits is simply CYB rules, especially if the requirement has mentioned something along the lines of overlap profits, identify overlap profits. I know we're talking about opening year rules here. Part B, calculate the tax-adjusted trading profit for the year ended 30th June 2011. Your computation should commence with the net profit figure of 22,000 and should list all the items referred to in the notes 1 to 8, indicating by use of 0 any items that do not require adjustment. So, as highlighted in red, tax-adjusted trading profit, I'm thinking adjustment of profits. So maybe some disallowed expenses, maybe some capital allowances. Part C, calculate income tax payable for NASTILE for tax year 2011-12. As we saw in the previous requirement, income tax payable, and we're thinking income tax computation, so that means there's probably a few types of incomes coming up. The second part of Part C, calculate NASTILE's balancing payment for tax year 2011-12 and her payment on account for 12-13, stating the relevant due dates. So I'm thinking some administrative issues, calculating some payment on account, some balancing payments, and of course some due dates that are also required. Part D, advise NASTILE of the consequences of not making the balancing payment on time until the 31st of May. Consequences of not making a payment, I'm thinking maybe some fines, maybe some interest, since we have been given a date there. Just to summarize what we have seen out of this question, we see that the question asked us for trading profits, CYB rules, and from the fact that there was a mention of an overlap profit, we're thinking over opening year rules. Next, the question asked for some tax-adjusted trading profits, hence adjustments of profits. So you've got some disallowed expenses, maybe some capital allowances. You can see I'm getting all this information without really reading the question. It's just from the requirement. The requirement is telling me quite a lot here. The third part of the question asks for income tax payable, hence the income tax computation, balancing payments and payment on account. You've got some administrative issues here, and at the same time consequences leading to fines and interest. So you can see there's quite a lot that I managed to get out of just reading the requirement. What I would like to do is take you through another set of requirements again to see how much we can take out of just a requirement. So the next one I have for us is from June 2008, Wireless Limited. This was question 2 in June 2008. First part, explain when an accounting period starts for corporation tax purposes. So again, we're thinking about some admin issues for companies. Part 2 of the question, calculate Wireless Limited's corporation tax liability for the 6-month period ended 31st March 2011. And I'm thinking corporation tax liability, probably corporation tax computation here. So what we see is we have accounting periods, as I said, corporation tax administrative issues, and then our corporation tax liability asking us to do a CT computation there. I would like to bring in one more requirement to see what we can make out of. As you can see, by just looking at a sample of a few requirements, we are able to tell ourselves so much about what we might be doing in the attempt to answer the question. So let's go and see another requirement. Paul Opus from the pilot paper. Requirement. compute Paul's capital gains tax liability for the tax year 10-11 and advise him by when this should be paid. Assume that the entrepreneur's relief is to be claimed wherever possible. So, if you see, I've highlighted for you the capital gains tax liability. The minute I see capital gains tax liability, I'm thinking I require the CGT computation here. So that means I might have some disposals, maybe some chattels, maybe some part disposals, and thinking along the lines of wanting to calculate the gains liability. So what we see is that there is quite a lot that we can get from just reading the requirement. And reading the requirement within the first 15 minutes of the reading time gives you a good understanding as to what's the first question you want to do, what's your favorite one in the exam, and always start with the one that you're most comfortable with. So, to summarize our step 1, reading the requirement helps us analyze all the questions we have in front of us. In somewhat way, we're putting the questions on, all the questions on a plate just by looking at the requirements, so that we can pinpoint which one we want to do first, hence knowing our question order.